Hello! Oh, welcome everyone! Oh, you're nice. Hello everyone, welcome to the ACT Party Conference for 2020. Look at you all, you look amazing. You've got your coffee ready to go. It's going to be good. My name's Sam, everyone. Hello. I'm going to be your MC today, making sure you know what's going on. And my friends, today we are talking about, oh, that did say dare to be different just before, but now it's just a picture of me. Hello. It's a bit different from what I expected. Yeah, we are daring to be different today, everyone. I just want to say a big welcome to all the members of the party, all the supporters that are here. Thank you so much for being here. And well done. That's what we want to hear. Very good. And yes, of course, all the members of the media today as well who have been forced to come here for work. So thank you. It's very nice of you to spend your weekend with us. Very good. Guys, we've got a wonderful show for you today. We've got a bunch of different speakers to hear from. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to be entertained and enthused. You're licking the inside of your coffee cup and it's really distracting. Are you okay? Can I get you a spoon or something? Are you... No, you're okay? Okay, that's good. Sorry, you're all right. What was I saying? Oh, yes, we're daring to be different today, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to cram pack a party conference down into a couple of hours. It's going to be fantastic. At the end, we're all going to go downstairs and have lunch together if you guys are a good audience. And I feel like you guys are going to be a really good audience. Yeah? You are? Great. We're going to start by doing just one of these things right now. We are actually live streaming this event today. There are a bunch of people at home who have been very lazy and tucked up in their bed covers, tucked up in their bed under the covers, and they don't get the lunch, so shame on them. But we are going to test our levels for them. So on the count of three, I want everyone to do exactly what you're doing. Maybe put down your coffee cup. We're going to clap, we're going to cheer, we're going to make a big round of applause. Everyone join in with me on three. 1, 2, 3. That is great, everyone. We're setting our sound levels to make sure we don't peak out during the show. It's very technical stuff that I pretend to understand. I want to hear, are there people up the top? Give me a cheer if you're up the top. You sound great. Front row, give me a cheer. Very good. Don Brash, give me a cheer. I don't want you to cheer for Don. That's not how it works. Just Don Brash, give me a cheer. Again, I don't... No, you don't understand. Don Brash is a single person, right? I'm hearing many cheers. Just Don Brash. No, listen people, just one and only Don Brash. Everyone else be quiet for a second. Oh, that took so long. I'm sorry, the show's going to run long now that we've done that. Don, I just want to say hello, hi, my grandma used to babysit you, which I think is really funny. Her name was Molly Woods, if you remember. Yeah, it was a while ago. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to crack right into this. I'm going to introduce the president for you right now. I want you to clap and cheer and go crazy for him. Be the wonderful audience that you be. Someone's rustling. That's rude. No, you're fine. Sorry, I don't mean to be mean with these things. You're good. Get your rustles out of the way right now. We are going to, and just before we get him up, you're so eager. I love it, Tim. It's great. Please, if you could turn your cell phones off or tuck them away in your bag, that would be great. Emergency exits are there and there. I have to do this because I am a flight attendant. And the other thing is, what's the other thing? Toilets. You're allowed to go to the toilet if you need to. Just, they're downstairs in the atrium. Good. You ready? Don Brash, are you ready? Some people. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please go wild and crazy and welcome Tim Jago! Nice to see you, Tim. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. What a fantastic turnout and what a fantastic mood in the room. We've got 2 David Seymours and now 2 Don Brashes. We're doing really, really well. Those of you that benefited from my President's newsletter earlier in the week will have shared my metaphor about the exciting journey that ACT is on. I referred to it not as a roller coaster ride full of twists and turns and ups and downs, but more akin to being on a fast-moving, one-way express train that's delivering new MPs to Parliament. Of course, to know where you're going, you need to know where you've come from. And in the interest of time, I'm going to reflect really just on the last 12 to 18 months. But that's not in any way to undervalue the earlier history of the party, all 27 years of it, because it's been colourful and it's been transformative. Indeed, we have many of the party luminaries with us here today. Sir Roger, a very warm welcome. You need no further introduction. John Boscawen, Don Brash, John Banks, past party leaders still actively contributing to our policy development, our debates, and our campaigning activities. Thank you. A special mention to Dame Jenny Gibbs and Christopher and Jackie Reeve. Your extraordinary underwriting of party activities is noted. We owe you a debt of gratitude. Pamela Pedersen, it's been a tumultuous year for you and your family. We're delighted to have you here today, continuing the support that Stu gave over so many years. And to each and every one of you here today, and those of you joining us by live feed across Facebook and other platforms, and I'm reliably informed we've got people tuning in from Uganda. Each and every one of you have contributed individually and collectively to build the party to what it is today. Bigger, more vibrant, more influential, and soon more MPs. Let's show our appreciation for everyone making that contribution, big or small. We are where we are today on the back of 15 months of hard work. Let's not underestimate the significance a little over 12 months ago of our REACT event, an exceedingly powerful and successful call to action, an equally successful updating of the party's brand and positioning, and a watershed moment that has attracted thousands of new people to ACT and what we stand for. I want to thank the team that staged REACT, not because we failed to thank them last year, but because essentially that same team has stepped up again this year and produced this outstanding Dare to be Different event. In particular, Malcolm Pollock, without doubt ACT's most prolific volunteer. He's the Epsom campaign chair, a member of the National Campaign Council, someone who invests hugely in the curation of the ACT brand and key messaging. And as I say, mastermind of this fantastic event. Let's show our appreciation for Malcolm. REACT was a sellout event. 100 tickets sold, many others arriving on the day, meaning it was standing room only. And still someone in the media, who incidentally wasn't there, posted a story about us only managing to attract 100. Let's see what they write this year. Because here today, nearly 600 of us are in the suburb ASP theatre. But more significantly, today is the largest political gathering of the faithful that any party has achieved this year. Larger than National, larger than the Greens, larger than Labour. We're doing everything larger than at any time since 2005. 52 candidates have been confirmed. That's 20% more than in 2017. And we still have the likelihood of adding more. It's the most expansive campaign since 2005, involving many new local and regional committees, 4 candidate induction schools, a campaign planning team that's been in place since September last year, the involvement of some seriously talented strategists and creative types, and a small national staff team and several industrious volunteers who punch well above their weight. Cumulatively, it's been a staggeringly busy but successful year. To put it in context, I want to share with you some simple but truly impressive statistics. ACT's membership has more than doubled since May 2019, in fact nearly 2.5 times. In that same time, the number of people who have somehow found themselves in an ACT database so that we can talk to them has grown by more than 350%. David Seymour's personal Facebook following has him amongst the top 5 of all MPs, and that includes the Prime Minister. When we push social messaging out now, we can be reaching as much or as many as 552,000 people with a single message. Just a few months ago, we got excited when that was 150,000. That's 370% growth. You've seen the polls. Certainly 3%, nudging 4%, and we're hearing stories that the other parties have us at 5%. And we were being written off little more than a year ago as a 1 MP party unable to climb above 1%. We are the only parliamentary party that's consistently over the past 12 months trended upwards. Small we might have been, but David Seymour has punched above his weight, stayed true to his and ACT's principles, and justifiably earned the reputation for being the most effective politician in Parliament and the true opposition voice. I put it to you, no other party proportionally can lay claim to the breadth of measurable growth statistically or reputationally. Translated, it's 4, 5, or even 6 MPs on their way to Parliament. And what a fantastic set of MPs they're going to be. We announced our list precisely 14 days ago. The media and the other parties sat up and took notice. The commentators commended us. Smart, said Mike Hosking. But let's not be complacent. With effort and great policies, it can be 6% or 7%, and that's 7 or 8 MPs on their way to Parliament. We haven't got to where we are today without you and a truly amazing team. You've had faith in us and you have supported us. It is, as I said, our most expansive campaign since 2005. It's a campaign like no other. It's been played out on social media as well as through the mainstream news coverage and right across provincial New Zealand. So we need to be everywhere all of the time. This calls for innovative campaigning, the clever use of social media, constantly fresh and relevant storytelling, and being hugely accessible. If you haven't already, be sure to download the ACT app, our campaign on your phone. Trust me, we're prepared. Our campaign war room is up and running. Our nationwide bus tour is organised, ready to go. Our campaign messages are defined and ready to roll out. We have the best minds on board and they're hard at work 7 days a week. We are constantly taking the pulse of the nation and listening and responding. It's our most expansive campaign since 2005, but also our most expensive. There will be no change out of $1 million, and our high-cost weeks are still in front of us. We can't borrow for it, we patently can't deliver it and leave the organisation in debt. So we need to fundraise, 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 and ensure we bring the campaign in on budget. So just as I conclude my President's newsletters with a reminder that it's always a good time to donate, I'm wrapping up my address to you now with a reminder it's always a good time to donate. You've heard about the ACT app, which is one way of donating. Scan the QR code on the billboard out in the foyer when you leave and start loading the app immediately. Even easier today, our team are in the foyer with EFTPOS machines ready to take your donation. And for those of you donating more than $100, there's a free ACT campaign t-shirt. Ladies and gentlemen, putting multiple MPs into Parliament, holding all the other parties to account, and advocating ACT's critically thought out policies to improve New Zealand right now seems the only certain way of bringing change to New Zealand's future. when all the other parties insist on more of the same. We're on a journey together, remember? A fast-moving, one-way express train that's delivering more MPs to Parliament. Welcome aboard, strap yourself in and hold on tight for the ride of your life.
Why do I dare to be different? I'm not just in a very narrow band, I'm in a wide band because that's how I see it. I just see the issues are huge. I don't think ACT has all this baggage that the other political parties have, and they can't separate themselves from. ACT is clean, it's fresh.
Why do I dare to be different? My experience with freedom of speech within my generation can be difficult, since opinions that are bad, don't conform to society's norms, or are different are not left to debate, they're shut down. The ACT values that I like are the freedom of choice and the freedom to be. That means to be yourself within society and to not be afraid of who you are.
What a start, everyone. What a start. We're going to roll straight on. Our number 2 speaker is very conveniently the number 2 in the party as well. Please welcome the Deputy Leader of the ACT Party, the wonderful Brooke van Velden.
Good morning. I'm Brooke van Velden, ACT's Deputy Leader. I see many people here today that I recognise, and I thank you for your support. But there are many people here who I don't know, people who are at their first ACT event. And you might be wondering how and why this 27-year-old woman became the Deputy Leader of the ACT Party. At first, I was a Greens voter. But while studying economics and trade at university, I became disillusioned with this idea that protectionism, increasing taxes, and throwing money at problems are the answers to the major issues facing us today, such as climate change and poverty. We can't tax our way into prosperity. I'd also become appalled by this idea that any person who has a contrary opinion should be silenced. I could see the seeds of that then. And it's become particularly nasty recently. I started looking for alternative parties to support, and I found ACT. They got it. International trade and free markets have pulled billions of people from hardship and poverty around the world. It's only through prosperity that people have the wealth and living standards needed to care about the environment. While you chose to come to a political event today, I attended my first ACT event only by happy coincidence. It was this event that turned me from a casual ACT supporter to a committed ACT member and eventual candidate and deputy leader. I'd been singing for a charity event in Mount Eden, and a few friends said, hey, we should go down to the bar afterwards and celebrate. So we walked into an ACT event by mistake. And I got talking to a few people, including David Seymour. I got invited to future ACT events, and I was impressed with ACT's openness. People from all walks of life were debating ideas with no judgment. They were people who understood that good public policy matters and believed that through small government and individual freedom, we can make New Zealand a better country for everyone. We're a collection of New Zealanders, all with our own opinions, brought together by these fundamental principles. We're not afraid to question, challenge the status quo, and put forward new ideas. We believe the free exchange of ideas is a fundamental principle of our free society. We believe in equal rights under the law, keeping a check on the government's spending and the government's overreach into the lives of individuals. We believe in the power of the individual and our right to autonomy. We're critical thinkers and straight talkers. We're a group I'm very proud to be part of. I went on to work in the private sector, helping small businesses navigate government bureaucracy, before joining David Seymour in Parliament to pass the End of Life Choice Act. I don't have my own personal story with assisted dying, but having travelled around New Zealand listening to people's experiences with bad deaths and seeing how much pain there is in our communities, it became a deeply personal issue for me. Those stories will stay with me. The person diagnosed with a terminal condition, knowing that they're allergic to pain medication and that the end will be unbearable. Another person's horror at being the first on the scene to a suicide and finding out later that the person had a terminal illness. There are so many stories and so much pain with ripple effects in our communities. This law will alleviate that fear of the unknown, knowing that there is a choice, even if you don't choose to take it. It will bring so much comfort to people facing their last days. I know in my heart that passing that law through Parliament was the right thing to do. That change was made with one MP, David Seymour. He turned down a ministerial position so he could take a principled stand on that issue. Imagine what change ACT could make with more MPs who think the same way, who have compassion, respect for New Zealanders, and can take principled stands. I saw how real change happens in Parliament. I want to be part of more positive change in New Zealand, and I want to be your voice in Parliament. We've been let down by this government. The government brags about spending billions of dollars on an economic recovery, but it doesn't have a good track record of getting good value for our money. The Provincial Growth Fund, just one example, was a complete waste of money. $3 billion down the drain. $140 billion in borrowing for the economic recovery of COVID-19 is not cheap change. The government's plan is to saddle my and the next generation in debt that we'll be paying back for the rest of our lives. We need certainty and clarity and a sensible plan. We need a plan that will stimulate the economy, create and keep jobs, and give my generation certainty that this recovery won't mean we either face being unemployed, as it's often the young who are let go first, or taxed within an inch of our lives, if we're one of the lucky ones to keep our jobs. ACT has a sensible, clear 5-point plan for growth. We can grow the economy and jobs, cut taxes and red tape, invest in public health and better technology at our borders, all while leaving less debt for our kids. All it took is a little bit of common sense, critical thinking, and fresh ideas. My generation are at a crossroad. What happens now will impact us for the rest of our lives. ACT's plan can get the economy moving. But it's not just jobs that my generation are concerned with. It's housing and mental health. They're areas where we can do better and we must do better. Home ownership is out of reach for too many people in New Zealand. This government promised to fix the housing crisis for us and build 100,000 homes. They've completely failed. They've only built 101. House prices have increased at rapid rates over these last 3 years. I tried buying a home in Wellington. In 1 year, prices in the area rose by $100,000. A whole generation have been locked out of home ownership. We're constantly chasing a ladder that's being pulled up higher. We need to stop treating the symptoms and get to the bottom of the disease. We need structural change. ACT has a plan to build more homes and achieve housing affordability for my and the next generation. We'd repeal the failed RMA and replace it with a new Urban Development Act. It would allow owners more rights to build on their land, and when land prices rise too high, automatically free up land for development. We'd replace council inspections, which anyone who's built a house will know delays projects, with compulsory building insurance. It's an innovative and efficient system, and it's also common sense. Good mental health is as important as good physical health. Around 1 in 5 New Zealanders will face a mental health challenge in any given year. Our youth suicide rate is our darkest statistic. The government promised to inject billions more into mental health, but increasing funding doesn't guarantee improvements for people's care. It doesn't address the issues of choice, accountability, or getting better value for the mental health dollar, or the individuals and communities being served. We can do better. ACT has a plan to transform mental health and addiction services in New Zealand. We can put people at the heart of mental health care and empower those seeking help to have a service tailored to what they need to manage their own mental health or addiction. We'd call it Mental Health and Addiction New Zealand. It would be a world-class commissioning agency that assesses individual need and sources the best provider for a person's therapy and care. Patients could choose providers who offer treatment in specific cultural contexts, languages, or regions. Mental Health and Addiction New Zealand would be the one central interface for mental health and addiction funding across New Zealand, reducing bureaucracy and administrative burden. It would use its expertise and patterns of data to drive better performance from the sector, evaluating where the money is going, to whom, and what services work based on evidence and data. A standalone mental health and addiction agency on a national scale with its own funding is a clear statement that our thinking as a nation has evolved. Mental health is not to be stigmatised. It is to be put on an equal standing with general health care. ACT is committed to challenging the status quo and thinking for the future. This election is crucial for my generation. With so much at stake, we need critical thinkers who can question and debate ideas. ACT has never been needed more. Thank you.
Why do I dare to be different? I'm scared that one day I won't be able to say what I actually believe freely, because I will have to face legal repercussions for my own beliefs, which I think is just plain wrong. I don't think that the government should be allowed to dictate what you believe in and what you're allowed to say. People want to be free. No one wants to be oppressed. No one wants other people to tell them what to do. We were promised no new taxes, and yet taxes just keep piling up for us. And why should a hard-working individual who's worked hard throughout their whole life be punished for their success? I think it's unfair.
Well, the ACT Party found their previous candidate, Brooke, in a bar in Mount Eden. And they found their next one at a farm up north. So ladies and gentlemen, I want you to put on your swan dries, chuck on some gumboots, and please welcome to the stage, Mark Cameron.
Cowshed music, we've all heard it. There's just briefly, a bit of housekeeping. There was an incident with a tractor and a German sports car outside. I apologise. And if someone with tech can help me with a GoFundMe page, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, I'm the Northern ACT candidate for Northland and a bloody proud rural spokesman. So here's here for rural New Zealand. Yeah, let's give it to that. Thanks guys, thanks very much. A little bit about me. I'm a farmer, I'm a father, I'm a partner, and more than anything, I'm a bloody proud ACT candidate and rural spokesperson for the country. Rural New Zealand people need your help. That's the simple reality of it. I'll fill you in on a few blanks. I've milked 300 cows for 32 years, twice a day, and you guys can do the maths on that one because, yeah, people on their iPhones, I can see them adding it up already. But in that time, a lot's happened. I've chased bulls. I've been chased by bulls. Broke 8 ribs and a couple of collarbones out of that one. So, yeah, an interesting time of affairs. But more importantly than anything in all this, guys, I've actually buried 4 of my friends. And they're Kiwis. They're all of us. We're all bloody proud Kiwis, and they've gone. Rural New Zealand is having the worst time it's ever had. And the simple fact is, we've been abandoned by 2 successive governments. I cannot say it enough. So I applaud the ACT Party. I thank them enough for that. I can't tell you the truth of the matter. This is going on every day in my neck of the woods. So let's unpack it. There's a lot going on that you may or may not be aware of. We've got the Zero Carbon Bill, the ETS, the Freshwater Initiative, and the RMA, just to speak to a few things that go on in my world. If we were to look at the Zero Carbon Initiative and the methane framework, well, what a fiasco. You talk to central government, it has one set of rules. The regional council, it will ultimately have another one, and then the dairy industry standards is confused with all the stuff in the middle. Dairy farmers have no idea and leave the rest to argue amongst themselves. The afforestation that this creates. Now, I don't know if you guys all sort of understand this concept, but 1 billion trees. Everyone has a home here. My home, your home. The instant there's 1 billion trees go in, where does the small community that embraces rural New Zealand, the sheep and beef farmers, they disappear. And more importantly than this, and I get quite emotional, these are families. That's a local school, a local kindy. The motorcycle man, he's gone. The 1 billion trees go in, rural New Zealand rots from the inside out. We as the ACT Party will repeal and replace large parts of that. The methane framework, well, what is that? If you put that into context, that's a teaspoon of oil in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. The ACT Party will be rid of it. We know it's idiotic. We're going to follow the science and support our farmers. Now, I don't confess to be a very good fencer. Most of them are sort of a bit like this, but I do a lot of it. When the pennies run dry in the winter and the cows aren't going through the cow shed, I do a fair amount of fencing. Now, New Zealand farmers, sheep and beef guys, dairy farmers, and a lot of growers have actually done 54,000 kilometres of fences. Now, that's a lot. That's a fair way to the moon. This government, this current government, certainly hasn't acknowledged that. Now, that to me is a disgrace. New Zealand farmers are not the great harbingers of environmental doom. We're bloody proud of the environment that we live in. We're acutely aware of the importance to urban New Zealand and the country as a whole with the fresh water. We also are aware, daren't I say it, and I apologise for being a bit one-eyed, down the road here we've got beaches and bays full of human waste. Now, let's have the honest conversation because it's not happening. The RMA, well, far out, we can't even put a paddling pool up with getting told off. It's idiotic. The ACT Party will repeal and replace it. There needs to be an honest framework in and around this space. Getting things done is so damnably difficult. We can and we will replace it. So we are after your party vote, which you all well know because you're bloody good people and you're here for the same reason I am. We've got to get rid of the team that's in because the team in this building has got more going on for it and I celebrate that here and right now. So I want we to join in this vision of a Party Vote Act, get ACT in Parliament in a greater capacity than David, who's worked so fastidiously hard. We can join a collection of other people alongside him. Restore some pride in rural New Zealand farmers. The Nats have disappeared, well, Labor was a non-event. ACT is the only party that certainly made any noise, to my knowledge, in rural New Zealand. I honestly believe they can bring the message that we all want to hear. So as we in rural New Zealand say, having a yarn over the farm fence when things get rough, stay at it, you dairy farmers, because you're dairy farmers, sheep and beef guys, growers, you're bloody good at it, and I mean it, you really, really are. We as the ACT Party believe that. As we say in rural New Zealand, when you've had a guts full of it, Head down, bum up, trip up 7 times, stand up 8. And I'll leave you with one anecdote that I've heard many, many times, and a lot of you would have. Abraham Lincoln framed it like this. He said, being a president was a difficulty. Being a bloody good farmer, well, he didn't say that word, but anyway, being a farmer was a darn sight harder. So I'll leave it with you guys. It's been an absolute privilege. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Carmel Claridge, and I'm very proudly standing as the ACT candidate in the Tamaki electorate. Yeah, I work at the coalface of the housing crisis, trying to place families who are in precarious housing situations into rentals. So what I'm seeing on a daily basis is the private sector being able to deliver solutions for people in need far, far more efficiently than the government can. Everybody's looking for a more equitable society where every New Zealander has access to safe, secure and affordable housing. There just needs to be a recognition that sometimes the government is not the best solution.
The platform of free speech is really, really important in this country. It's something in a democratic environment that we should not lose, and I'm very passionate about it. I grew up in a country that had freedom of speech, had freedom of thought, has freedom of the written word, regardless of whether we agree with it or not. And that's what New Zealand is based on. It's the democracy that we live in. I don't want to see legislation being put in place that actually takes those liberties, those fundamental freedoms from us.
Hi there, I'm James McDowell and I'm standing in the Waikato electorate for the ACT Party. ACT Party values are about personal liberty, autonomy, freedom, the freedom to achieve what you want in life without government intervention and roadblocks and stopping you along that journey. It is the idea that the state does not own you, does not own your body. You are free to choose your life, how you want to live your life, so long as you are not harming others.
ACT's my party because of the core values it has. Freedom to enterprise, freedom to be an individual, and freedom to govern your own life. As a small business owner, ACT's economic policy, with a flatter, fair tax structure, allows us to create new jobs, allows us to create wealth, and allows us to prosper again. And so that's why ACT's the party for me.
Hi, I'm Beth Holbrook and I'm standing for the ACT Party in the Kaipara ki Mahurangi electorate. ACT has been my party for 26 years. As somebody who's been self-employed for all of that time, in farming and a variety of small businesses, red tape and regulation have been the bane of my life. And I see it's the same for all small businesses, even communities and individuals who just want to get ahead, do something for themselves and be more productive.
Well, everyone, from Mark at the top of the North Island, we head up to the top of the South Island, where I'm from, the mighty town of Nelson. Please welcome the wonderful Chris Bailey. Good to see you, Chris. Thank you, mate.
Thanks very much. My name's Chris Bailey, and I'm extremely honoured to be standing here as a candidate for the ACT Party. I've long had an avid interest in politics, and my political affiliation and beliefs have been shaped by my experiences and what I've learned throughout my life. I'm a teacher, a businessman, and have served in the New Zealand Police. My mum would be very proud. My father, on the other hand, probably not so much. Let me tell you why. You see, I grew up with a very dominant father who's a vocal Labour supporter. He was a marine engineer and an ardent supporter of the unions. I realised at an early age that the only reason for his Labour affiliation was the 1951 waterfront strike. This occurred when he was 12 years old. His attitude to everything else was very much right of centre. The misguided loyalty was obvious when I was a kid, but it wasn't until I was 40 years old and in the police before I was brave enough to tell him who I voted for. It just wasn't worth the drama. One reason I'm standing for ACT is because I saw David Seymour standing alone for free speech. Whether on minority rights, firearms, end of life, Zero Carbon Act, he'd be there, often a lone voice of sanity in a wilderness. And he got things done. In a world without ACT, we'd have a parliament of mush, going along and getting along, as our rights slip quietly away. We have too many MPs happy to go with the flow, rather than stand up to be counted and say what they believe is right. And yet we live in an information age, bombarded with facts, stats and clickbait. The right to think freely and critically matters more today than at any time in our history, and that's why ACT is so important. I'll tell you a story. A few years ago, while teaching, I happened to suggest that I thought charter schools were a good idea. For the uninitiated, I should let you know that the teaching profession isn't exactly a hotbed of conservative thinking. The reaction I got, you might have thought that I was advocating compulsory slaughter of kittens. A teaching colleague looked at me in the eye and told me point blank, "You have no right to be in education." He then got up and, leaving behind half a beer, he left the pub, refused to even have a chat about it. I don't know about you, but isn't this shutting down of discussion and dialogue an increasingly common trait? It's pretty dangerous too. More recently, I received a Facebook post from a friend of some 20 years. It read, "My advice to everyone who's not an ACT supporter is to block all posts from David Seymour, who only criticises Jacinda, who has done a fantastic job and, well, you know the song sheet, I'm sure." Daring to be different, I dared to reply. I didn't even mention the government's missteps on housing, education, regulation and all the rest. He defriended me on the spot. Refused to debate, shut me down. I bet a few of you have experienced similar things, especially on social media. But it's all right, we're grown-ups. I was a police officer for 14 years and I'm actually trained to deal with bullies. But what about the next generation? Will they inherit our tradition of free and rational debate or live in a cauldron of woke conformity? And if we won't stand up for the spirit of free inquiry and free thinking, then who will? As well as being a former policeman, I'm a current secondary school teacher. Teaching is a fantastic career and I'd recommend it to anyone. I started in 1986 and have loved every year I've taught since then. Helping young people fulfil their potential and be creative and encouraging inquisitive minds and thought, it's one of the most rewarding things you can do. I salute everyone who has made teaching their vocation. I'm sure thousands of parents now appreciate teachers a lot more after the COVID-19 lockdown. But we must remember that part of teaching is leading, and when we see teachers supporting students going on strike for climate change, trying to be their buddies, not their educators, and condoning truancy, then it's time to ask, have we gone too far? I didn't want to feed kids propaganda, but I did think it would be a good idea for the students to experience an alternative view, to debate and dialogue the issues for themselves. I started a lunchtime discussion group about climate change and what it means for all of us, because my job as an educator isn't supposed to teach kids what to think, but how to think. As John Stuart Mill wrote back in 1859, even those confident that their opinions are correct will benefit from hearing a novel counter-argument. They will come to understand their own position more clearly. God only knows how John Stuart Mill would have lasted on Twitter, but that's for another time. Students were great. We had some excellent discussions with robust debate, differing attitudes. Students discussed the premise that science is a process of forming hypotheses and testing them, not adhering to a body of arbitrary compulsory viewpoints. When they put their minds to it, they could understand the complexity and nuance of the science while beginning to question the purpose behind all the alarmism and hysteria. They, like me, couldn't understand why mentioning any opinion not aligned with the popular mantra was so taboo. In short, I believe they began to think for themselves. Young people are dropping out, suffering depression and worse, because they are constantly being told there is no hope. Anxiety and depression are skyrocketing when, as we're told, alcohol and drug use is in decline. Why is this? The climate of fear, as well as the narcissism and nastiness on social media, has a lot to do with it. I can speak from experience. I was a police officer, youth aid officer for a number of years. During this time, I had a lot of dealings with oranga tamariki, supporting children who suffered physical, emotional and psychological abuse. I can tell you, it breaks your heart. In my view, we are letting our children down. We need to give them facts, hope, and then the ability to critically evaluate for themselves and the mindset to get things done. In other words, come to think about it, we need to make them a bit more like ACT Party members. I believe there's a better way. And this story is not about climate change. It's about being prepared to ask the right questions. Is climate change real? Of course it is. Things are changing. The bigger and far more important challenge is, what are we going to do about it? How can we balance our responsibility to the planet with people's legitimate aspirations to improve their lives? And now, as we emerge blinking into the sunlight after COVID-19, I'm less interested in whether you wear a mask or not than how we can jumpstart our economy of such an assault on our health and our wealth. These are the questions that we in ACT aren't afraid to ask. I'm a teacher because I want to help our kids be prepared to tackle the most important challenges facing humanity. If we're going to change our future, then we need the millennials and Generation Z by our side because they are our future. I love this country. New Zealanders are independent, respectful, responsible and resourceful. And if New Zealand is going to continue to be the incredible country we are, then we need to encourage young people to reason and come to their own conclusions. Adults have to recognise our role is to curate and encourage discussion and debate while helping them develop the resilience to persevere through hard times. Those are the kind of values that we in ACT are proud of, and they are the principles that can truly change your future. But New Zealanders should not be under any illusion. The thought police are out in force. One example, Andrew Little's free speech legislation will cripple discussion, nullify debate, stunt opinion, and serve a very real agenda of fear and control. At school, we don't have mufti days anymore. Instead, we have casual dress days. I did a bit of research, and for the life of me, I can't work out how offence can be taken. The new laws being proposed to protect anyone from being offended about anything are concerning. A poster in my classroom says, "Just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right." My students get it. As the neuroscientist Sam Harris put it better than me, that feeling of taking offence, perhaps more than any other property of your mind, can mislead you. And I think he's right. Don't take offence, get involved. Don't shut down debate, instigate it. And don't moan about the present when you can change your future. One name I haven't heard anyone complain about is my hospitality business in Nelson. It's called The Honest Lawyer. Speaking as a businessman, I have to say that in 3 years, this Labor government has shown a complete lack of understanding about how business works. And this is at a time when small business has never been more important to economic recovery. I employ 30 fantastic staff. During the recent lockdown, they were all looked after very well with the wage subsidy. Effectively, they were put on a benefit until we could open our doors again. Not only did our rent rates, power, phone, other fixed costs continue, the Beehive put the minimum wage up. Knowing there was zero income for the business, they put the minimum wage up. I just hope that the more I say it, the better I'll understand it, but it just doesn't make sense. As a government, we need to be making it cheaper to hire people after the crash, not more expensive. New Zealand is going to need to adjust its thinking due to the pandemic and its devastating effect on businesses. We must not fall for the lazy thinking that if people are paid lots, they'll work hard. People should be paid lots if they work hard. To me, that's just common sense. ACT's policy to freeze the minimum wage for 3 years would help both employees and employers to both keep their jobs and plan for the future with more security. It will create more jobs. And it will encourage businesses to invest in the future with more certainty and confidence. Labor says, trust the government. We in ACT say to individuals and entrepreneurs, we trust you. There's so much that we need to do for small businesses. The complexity and technicalities currently required in employment contracts is prohibitive. The personal grievance process is so biased that good, caring business owners have given up defending them. It's easier and more cost-effective to just pay the demand, to keep the business so that other people can be employed. It's time to end the ideological dogma that business owners are somehow the enemy. COVID-19 has shown how we are in this together, and if we are to revitalise and rebuild our economy, it will be businesses like this leading the way. I've heard it said that if business was easy, everyone would be doing it. Anyone would think that there was no one in this current cabinet who has ever even owned a business or had to make payroll. Perish the thought. ACT's alternative budget is a common sense way to get businesses moving and New Zealanders working, written by people who know how business works to give them the jump start they need for growth. When we make it easier for businesses to operate, not tax them to oblivion, we will come back stronger and we will build back better. But it can only happen if New Zealanders vote to change their future. The choice could not be clearer. The Greens want to tax the successful and redistribute their hard-earned wealth. ACT want to enlist every New Zealand business owner saying, we trust you, we believe in you, and we respect the work that you do to keep our economy going. I believe in ACT for many, many reasons, and our business policy shows a clear understanding of the issues currently holding businesses back from really making New Zealand hum. Simplifying GST returns for small, medium businesses, an immediate reduction in GST, and the scrapping of provisional tax are sound economic policies. I'm a special needs teacher as well as an employer. I can tell you that the removal of the trial period directly affected the most vulnerable in our society. Another poor decision from a government that purports to care. It's true that I haven't always voted ACT, but it has become clear to more and more of us that if you want principled, honest, accountable government representing all New Zealanders, then David Seymour and ACT is your only choice. We've sprayed the cash around for long enough, and it's time for the adults to take back control. Any New Zealander who owns or works in a business can change their future. Any New Zealander who values free speech, being allowed to have and able to voice an opinion, can change their future. Any New Zealander who cares about the education, safety and future of their kids can change their future. These New Zealanders, and that pretty much covers them all, need to stand up and be counted. Now, more than ever before, I'm asking New Zealanders to change your future, stand with me and party vote ACT in September. Thank you.
Why do I dare to be different? ACT always aims to reduce government interference in our life. I want a government which allows me to make my own decision and allows me to pursue it in the way in which I'd like.
Why do I dare to be different? Freedom for everyone, just like the colors for the sky. Not only one colors. Should we have like a rainbow, have different colors? Freedom, just express yourself to be unique. You just need to express what you think. What you consider about that one. Don't worry about other people's. They judge you or something like that. They just, oh, you think that is negative, but I thought it's a positive. It doesn't matter.
Why do I dare to be different? I think what's important about ACT is that it cares about New Zealanders at all levels of society, regardless of where they come from. Freedom is important because it allows New Zealanders to do what they like without hurting anyone else.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to let you guys just have a pause for a little second, because you guys are clapping so well that we've had some complaints. Someone in Uganda said they can hear you, so well done, that's good. And don't worry, we'll have some ice at lunch later on that you can rest your hands on those, so that's good. That's the end of your break. You're about to have to clap again. I hope you're ready for that. We are going to Upper Harbour now. You're going to love it. Please welcome the wonderful Karen Shaw. Oh, more. There, come on, keep that going. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Thank you. It's such a privilege to be standing here today in front of you, not only representing ACT in Upper Harbour, but also as number 7 on the list. I'm very excited, not least because I hope to bring a fresh perspective to ACT. I understand that not many of you will know who I am, so I thought I would use today to tell you a bit of my story, why I'm standing here today, and most importantly, why we should all be choosing a vote for ACT in September. As a child, I grew up in a small town called Kaio, being raised by my grandparents. Life was simple. Power and running water wasn't a thing. And unfortunately, neither was indoor plumbing. But I was surrounded by a loving family. Around the age of 6, I was moved to Auckland to live with my mother. And this is where my life started to change. Now, I'm not going to go into this too much, but the pain and suffering I endured growing up, I would not wish on my worst enemy. My mother had just got married and was starting a new life. And now they were both taking on a child they didn't really know. Life was good until they had more children. And the stresses of living in such a small home and not having much made life tough. As time went by, we had more money and a better house. And to the outside world, we looked like the perfect family. But nothing could have been further from the truth. Life got so bad that by the age of 9, I didn't really think I was going to survive to the age of 10. It was around this time I ran away from home and cried out for help. This was my first experience with child, youth, and family. Unfortunately for me, my cries for help went unheard, and I was sent back to the exact same situation that I had run away from. I wasn't a strong person back then. I was quiet and polite and didn't really know how to stand up for myself. Unfortunately, this made me an easy target for bullies. The bullying got so bad that the school asked me to leave. To the bureaucrats, that was an easier solution than dealing with the problem. How often have we heard that? Around this time, my mother's marriage started falling apart, and eventually she ended up on the DPB. I felt alone, with nowhere to turn. The system had let me down in so many ways. So I kept to myself, and I tried hard to just simply stay unnoticed. By this stage in my life, I was at the point where I didn't even know if I wanted to wake up the next day. The simple truth is, I was at rock bottom. And as if by some kind of miracle, a woman by the name of Donna saw something was not right, and she came and asked me one simple thing: are you okay? Donna offered me a lifeline that day, one I knew I had to choose. And so I ended up on her doorstep with the shirt on my back, and she took me in, no questions asked. Now, this is my second experience with the system. They organised FGCs and tried to find family members that would take me in. Time went by, and even though I loved living at Donna's, I knew I couldn't stay there forever. But when I asked questions, a social worker told me, "I'm sorry, but none of your family wants you." Can you imagine being a child and hearing from a social worker that nobody in this world wants you, not even your family? I asked about my grandmother, and I was told, "Your grandmother can't take you either. It's too hard for her." The system needs to learn that children are not just numbers. They're not just a problem to be gotten rid of. They have minds and hearts of their own, and our words can break them. I ended up spending years resenting my grandmother for this, and it was only when I got older I found out she had begged social services to take me, only to be told she was too old. Another failure in our system. As a result, I ended up with a family member that did their best, but I always knew that I was forced on them, and I never felt welcome. I was a teen, moving around from relatives' houses to friends' couches, and back with my mother when I had nowhere else to go. By the time I was 14, I had moved schools 7 times. I could not keep up, so I did what so many of us have done before, and I simply dropped out. I got a job, I saved what I could, and eventually I moved into a flat and became completely independent. At night I worked the graveyard shift at McDonald's, while I tried to continue my education by day doing a course. I drank a bit, I cried a lot, but I was doing okay, just. One night I promised myself that if I ever had a family of my own, I would never allow them to go through what I went through. I decided I would take every opportunity that I could to try and better myself. And indeed, my partner and I did have a child by the time we were 18, but we must have done something right because he's still here 20 years later. Ming found a job as a compressor mechanic, supporting me as I searched for work. And once the baby was born, I worked nights at any job I could find. Ming managed to find an apprenticeship in telecommunications. Not great money, but a great opportunity. That apprenticeship led to so much for us. I won't pretend it was easy. Long hours and not much money. But it was worth it, as he is now project manager in his field. Marriage came, and then a second child. And then a year later, we'd managed to save enough for our first home. It wasn't much, but it was ours. And it was so much more than a house to me. It was the happy home that I'd never had. We ended up living there for 15 years, 2 more children followed, until we finally could afford the home we live in today. When child number 4 came, I stopped working, and I started helping my mother-in-law with her business. In return, she taught me how to sew. This was amazing, as it allowed me to do things I wanted with my children, whilst learning a new skill. For the past 7 years, I've been a volunteer with the St John Youth Programme, holding the position of Assistant Divisional Manager for 5 of those years. I'm that mother, in the classroom, helping with reading groups, school trips, and anywhere else I'm needed. I've coached netball for our local schools for the last 9 years with both my daughters, and also managed my son's tennis team. I enjoyed working so much with my mother-in-law that when we moved into our bigger home, I set up my own little workshop and became self-employed in the New Zealand-made clothing industry. Whilst also starting up my own property management business. This brings me to why I'm standing here today. Over the years, I have watched and listened to many people around me, in the school grounds and the workplace, telling me their stories. I realise the system has not got better. In fact, I think it's got worse. It breaks my heart because I can relate so much to what they're saying, but there is little I can do except be a shoulder to cry on. And I don't know about you, but I believe New Zealanders deserve better. My frustrations grow as I watch promises being made to improve the system, and every time a promise was made, they changed the name, but not much else. Whether it be Child, Youth and Family, Ministry for Vulnerable Children, or now Oranga Tamariki, it's the same system with a new letterhead. This simply isn't good enough. It is time the government stopped the lip service and did something that actually helped the people who need it the most. The ACT Party is the party that can achieve this, and I believe this because ACT has shown that we are prepared to say what is right, not just what is popular. ACT tells it like it is. We give it to you straight. And we will stand up for things if they are not right, whether it is politically correct or not. We need to make some changes to our system, and I am standing here today telling you I'm going to take on that fight. I owe it to myself, and we owe it to every New Zealander that is lost in our broken system. So I am here to ask you, will you join me? After all, I'm one of the lucky ones. I had people that helped me believe in myself. None of those more so than my husband Ming, who has supported me throughout. So Ming, thank you so much for all that you have done for me and our family. It is thanks to you and others that I have managed to dig myself out of that hole and find a place where I can stand here today and say, I'm proud of myself. And I am proud to be part of this movement. We believe that the government must support people in genuine hardship, because none of us know when we may end up in hardship ourselves. COVID-19 has proved this. But we also know that welfare dependency prevents people from living independent, productive lives. It takes away dignity, self-esteem, and all their ambitions. This is why ACT supports creating an environment to get people off welfare, not just pay for more and more people on it. The only real solution to poverty and hardship is growth, new and better jobs, and higher wages. The problem is when welfare becomes a lifestyle, and it takes real courage to break that cycle. I know better than most what welfare for life actually means. I've seen it in people's eyes. I've seen it in my own eyes. Welfare must be a temporary fix, not a lifestyle choice. When we were young, we used to search behind the couch just to find enough money to buy a loaf of bread. And when this failed, we would hunt under the feijoa tree just to find something to eat for dinner. We must not rest while children are starved for food and opportunity. So let us ask ourselves instead, how do we make welfare work so the benefits go straight to our kids? I am delighted that later in this event, ACT will be announcing new welfare policies that get to the heart of the problems I faced growing up. You may be wondering why my focus today has only been on our welfare system, as this is not the only department that let me down growing up. There are 2 reasons for this. Firstly, I was only given a short space of time to speak today, and I personally believe Oranga Tamariki has so many issues that talk would take all day, if not more. But on a serious note, abuse and neglect is happening in this country every day. In every walk of life, abuse does not discriminate. Whether you are rich or poor, it happens. Unfortunately, the way our system has evolved over the years, this creates another problem: fear of getting help. In many cases, the abuse will continue far longer than it should. Society now judges people that reach out for help. More often than not, welfare is where victims end up. It's hard enough to leave a situation like that without society and our system adding to the mix. Women and men know that if they end up on welfare through no fault of their own, they will be judged as failures or bludgers. They also know that once you are in the system, it is very difficult to get out. And sometimes it can feel like the system is abusing you all over again. It seems like you're just going from one bad situation to the next. So this is not about attacking people on welfare. This is about giving people the tools they need to take back control of their own lives instead of the current system that holds them back. We need to start with the most vulnerable in this situation, our children. Parents are grown-ups that made their choices and decisions. Our children didn't get to choose yet, and they deserve our protection. I believe we all have a journey in life, and it doesn't matter how we reach the destination, as long as we start moving in the right direction. Imagine a country where our children can be free from the shackles of welfare and abuse. Imagine a country that treats everyone with dignity and respect. Imagine a country where everyone has the opportunity to change their future. You should never just be a number or a problem to be gotten rid of. ACT will give you the platform to help you achieve your dreams and goals and help you fulfill your potential no matter where you began. But we need to do better than just throwing money around and hoping for the best. We must be the vital lifeline that so many of us need. I promise we won't give up. We are listening. And I am here to tell you, we will do whatever it takes to get it done. So please, join me on this journey. Vote ACT and help us turn this dream into a reality. Thank you.
Wow. That was a very nice standing ovation, you guys. That was very good. It's quite hard to think of something to say after that, eh? Yeah. Do you know any good jokes? I'm all out at the moment. No, we'll talk about it later. Thank you, Karen. That was great. That was, yeah, always lovely to hear truthful honesty from someone. It's fantastic. We're going to keep moving along, ladies and gentlemen, though. We are going to move from Upper Harbour all the way to Te Atatu. We are going to welcome... I'm going to say this, I've been wanting to say this all day. The court is in session. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Simon Court.
Court with you, please. Good morning, kia ora tātou. I'm Simon Court, ACT candidate for Te Atatu. My family has been in New Zealand for almost 200 years. They were missionaries, pioneers, merchants, farmers, builders, accountants and engineers. One of my grandfathers built a ski club on Mount Ruapehu with his mates. It's still there today, enjoyed for over 60 years by families. My other grandfather was a former fighter pilot who still wanted to fly after the war. With his mates, they bought a two-seat glider kit set from Britain, and they each built a section in their garages, apart from my grandfather, who built his in the family living room. And they both built sailboats in their Auckland backyards. That was pretty normal stuff in my family. We're innovators, free thinkers, we're people who know what it takes to get things done, and we're not afraid to take a calculated risk. Perhaps that's why I feel I'm among friends today. I've worked as a civil and environmental engineer for 23 years for contractors, for consultants, and for local government. I've worked on complex road and highway projects in Auckland and Wellington, and in Fiji I worked with Chinese government contractors on major projects in remote and difficult conditions. As an engineer in local government, I managed investigation, design and remediation of Auckland's most dangerous closed landfills. I've worked on the best landfills and the worst landfills. I worked to clean up toxic timber treatment chemicals and dioxins found in Agent Orange. Did you know that toxic defoliant sprayed all over Vietnam was made right here in New Zealand? Because there were no clean-up regulations back then, they took a risk-based approach to demonstrate to the satisfaction of their community and their regional council that those sites would be safe after the clean-up. Those companies cleaned up using technology not even considered by government at that time. And they cleaned up because it was the right thing to do. And that leads me to the theme of what I'd like to talk to you about today. Now, colleagues and friends have asked me, Simon, why politics and why ACT? Well, that's not just because politics needs more engineers. I'm also a radical environmentalist. Don't worry, I'm not about to chain myself to an oil rig, climb a chimney stack wearing blue paint, or glue myself to the road, because those behaviours are no longer radical, those behaviours are in fact mainstream. We know it, right? We know it. It's on TV, on the 6 o'clock news, at least once a week. No, I'm a radical environmentalist because I'm a rational environmentalist. The Green Movement, cheered on by an unthinking media, abandoned the environment and conservation long ago in favour of climate economics and social control. Yeah. So, mainstream politicians and media often quote Greenpeace and Extinction Rebellion as experts without ever questioning the nonsense they are spouting. Why, you ask? Because in Parliament and in your local councils, being a climate activist or wanting to ban cars from busy retail areas is considered totally normal. I am speaking from experience here. What is radical now is to propose real solutions to environmental problems that are not all about taxes and regulations and banning things. So I'm a radical environmentalist because I believe in the natural rights of the individual. The natural right to life, liberty and property. And I believe before a government grants itself more rights, their duty is to uphold our natural rights. Because ultimately, as citizens, we know that our rights go hand in hand with real responsibilities. That shouldn't be radical, but it is. I'm radical because I believe that farmers, business and communities should lead conservation efforts, but in a partnership with government, not under threat of prosecution or persecution from bureaucrats who make no effort to understand their way of life. I'm a radical because I believe that business and communities are best placed to solve our worst environment and infrastructure problems through innovation and a partnership with government, not by heavy-handed, counterproductive regulation. Business and landowners have skin in the game. They will invest in doing the right thing because that's what their customers want. And as anyone who's actually run a small business knows, the customers are always right. My experience working as an environmental and civil engineer for 23 years has shown me that responsible business, led by smart people, should be allowed to innovate and show the government what the solutions are. As an engineer, I've worked for business that actually adopted a much higher international standard for its operations because that was the best way to manage their risk. So when friends and colleagues ask me, Simon, why are you standing for ACT? Well, I tell them I'm standing for ACT because ACT is the party of radical reform, the party which takes on the most difficult problems. I'm standing for ACT because ours is the party that puts its trust not in government, but in you, the citizen, the business owner, and the hard-working taxpayer. We need to take a radical approach to solve the most difficult problems in the environment, in transport, and with our broken and lacking infrastructure. In short, yes, we need to change our future. The path we've gone down since the 1991 RMA has led us to 3.5 million tonnes of waste going to landfill every year. The RMA lets councils like Auckland and Wellington give themselves 25-year consents to spill raw sewage onto beaches and waterways. And the RMA is being used as a bludgeon. It's being used to force farmers and landowners to abandon their farm environmental plans based on their local catchment and rivers and real soil science, and instead submit to a government plan. A straitjacket that sidelines the wishes of our local communities and businesses which produce our food and wealth. And I, for one, I'm standing here today to say enough is enough. It's time to act. So you may ask, how did an engineer like Simon come to this radical conclusion? Because engineers are generally regarded as steady as she goes types, right? Well, before I was an engineer, I started a degree in history and politics. It was Russian Revolution, Stalin and Trotsky and the Cold War. I went on the odd protest march because it was much more fun than lectures. And in the innocence of youth, I had my share of indiscretions. I even voted Green a couple of times. But David said he won't hold it against me. He tells me the ACT Party believes in redemption from even the most egregious of sins. But to return to my student days for a moment, while I was sitting in dusty lecture theatres and playing protester, half a world away, students my age rose up and they tore down the Berlin Wall with their bare hands. Those people were prepared to die for their freedom. So this was no longer a laughing matter to me. It seemed pretty inspiring, so after a while, I quit my arts degree and I went to see for myself. West Berlin was glitzy and modern, charming and traditional at the same time. At Checkpoint Charlie, where captured spies were exchanged between East and West, I marvelled at all the ways our fellow humans had tried and often died to escape their so-called socialist paradise. Using high-tension power lines for a flying fox escape is still the highlight for me, and it confirms pretty much everything you've seen in a Bond movie is real. But as you see parts of the Berlin Wall preserved, you cannot miss the warning from history to those who would take their freedom for granted. As I went further east, I saw workers and elderly people pushing wheelbarrows full of coal. Then the tar, actual tar, I saw workers ladle hot tar from a road onto a road from a cauldron, then scatter gravel over the sticky mess to effect some kind of road repair. So let us not forget, socialism was not just tyranny, poverty, it was an environmental disaster. And I'm not just talking about the Trabant, that East German plastic car powered by a big four-stroke lawnmower engine, blowing more smoke than a student flat on a Friday night. The eastern cities were ugly, crowded, dimly lit, covered in soot and grime, broken roads, few footpaths. I remember the air was blue with exhaust smoke. From trains passing through towns and villages, I saw factories spewing industrial waste into the so-called Blue Danube on its way to the more aptly named Black Sea. When I hiked in the Tatras Mountains, similar to our Tongariro National Park, small rubbish fires smouldered in places because park rangers had no other options. And as I travelled closer to the border with Ukraine, other backpackers told me to stay out. It was still highly radioactive after Chernobyl. I don't think it could have made a starker contrast to our clean, green New Zealand. It also struck me that New Zealand was a very wealthy country and how important that prosperity is to our way of life. So back in New Zealand, with a new appreciation for this incredible country, I switched to environmental science and then studied engineering while I worked full-time. I wanted to put everything I'd learned to good use. So now when people ask me why ACT and why now, I tell them big government and heavy-handed regulation has failed to solve our worst environmental, transport and infrastructure problems, and that it always would fail. I tell them we need radical reform of the RMA and to replace that bad law with good law that works with business to solve their own problems through technical innovation. I tell them we have a responsibility to tread lightly on the earth, but that government is too often the cause of, not the solution to our problems. Where my boys are growing up on the Manukau Harbour, you often see fur seals, sometimes killer whales, and sharks are always lurking. That once heavy, polluted harbour is again a playground for kayakers like me and a source of kai moana for fishers, but it's not clean by any means. Watercare discharges around 400 million litres of treated sewage every day into that harbour. And every year there are hundreds of raw sewage overflows from council's network into our streams and harbours, beaches around Auckland. We know that is wrong. Yet the Resource Management Act lets councils in places like Auckland and Wellington get away with it because they can ask for consents which are readily granted. That needs to change. And in my area, waste management and landfills, the RMA bans modern incinerators and makes getting a permit for waste to energy almost impossible. As a result, we now bury 3.5 million tonnes of waste in landfills every single year. And how does big regulating government think they're going to solve this one? Well, the Greens and the government are rolling out huge landfill taxes. They're doing that right now. It will add $50 to $60 a tonne for every household and business in this country. That is wrong to impose $200 million of cost every year onto households and businesses, while the RMA denies New Zealand access to the very technology that solved Europe's landfill crisis in under 15 years. So we need a government whose instinct is technology over taxation, innovation instead of ideology, and a fresh approach that works with the community to change our future for the better. And best of all, we in ACT have a radical vision of how to solve that particular environmental problem. Dump the RMA altogether. Right. It is ACT that is standing up for radical reform to replace that bad law with good law. It is ACT that wants to protect the environment, not pay lip service to it with placards and public relations. It is ACT who will instigate the kind of business-led innovation we need to solve our worst environmental problems. Real solutions to the challenges we face, and an end to the old red versus blue duopoly that has owned New Zealand politics for too long. A few weeks ago, I spent time with a farming couple who lead the way with farm environmental management on their award-winning Te Kuiti property. Starting around 5 years ago, they fenced waterways and regenerating bush, and they planted a wide variety of native trees and shrubs. Their plan is a partnership with local farm community groups, supported with good science from their regional council. Their suppliers and from local laboratories. It's quite a partnership. I saw a 40-year-old short fin eel, kura, freshwater crayfish and freshwater fish scooped from the creek right next to where we stood on a working farm. That is real leadership, investing your own profits back into the land and water with real returns measured in increased biodiversity, and they didn't need government help to do it. Relying on the government to solve our environmental problems, our transport issues, our infrastructure issues will always be a failed approach. We've seen it so many times here and around the world, but small business, communities and citizens can solve those problems. And you know why? Because we always have. That is because when a business puts up the solution, invests their own money to make it work, we can be more confident they will succeed than taxing and regulating that business. All government needs to do is to set the right framework for those partnerships and simply get the hell out of the way. So, in the aftermath of COVID-19, New Zealand has to focus on growing our productivity and our wealth as a priority in order to pay for the type of pristine environment we aspire to and to deliver the vital infrastructure that is lacking. And you've heard from Brooke. Wasn't she fantastic, by the way? ACT will develop good urban development law to allow our cities to reach their potential, which includes a much simpler process to deliver vital infrastructure, without the kind of political interference that leads to a light rail fiasco. That is a project no one asked for, and no one in my industry has a clue how it could even work. And the real tell with that one is that no credible engineering business stood up to deliver it. Very soon, if more of us are prepared to stand up and be counted, there will be more ACT MPs like me in Parliament. People who do understand what it takes to deliver real-world solutions to the most difficult problems we face, on environmental, on transport, and on infrastructure. So I say to you today, it's not enough to quietly vote. We need you to tell your friends and family and workmates, your taxi driver and your hairdresser, tell them why ACT is different. Let them know we are listening, and there are hundreds of thousands of us out there. Let them know there is hope for our future, that if they put their trust in ACT, they can change their future. And please tell them, give your party vote to ACT in this election. Thank you.
Why do I dare to be different? I believe very strongly in personal responsibility, and that's why I support ACT. When we take personal responsibility for ourselves, it enables us to help those around us more effectively. There'll always be some people in our society that will need help, but effectively the less the government interferes in our lives, the more that we can get on and take action, and New Zealand as a country will be more prosperous.
Why do I dare to be different? I'm a mother of 3 children, and this is what I want for them. They're all different individuals. I don't want them to be under a government that is actually controlling their lives. I think it's going to be quite tough. They're going to have a huge debt to repay through from COVID. I think that they're going to be struggling with house prices. I think they're going to be paying a lot of tax.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're up to our penultimate speaker for the night. It hasn't actually gone on that long. We're still in the day, I promise you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're heading to Rongotai in Wellington. Please welcome Nicole McKee. Hi, Nicole. Have easy.
Wow. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks for packing the auditorium today. I was actually really quite nervous, and when I came out down below, I was really nervous. But seeing you all here, I'm now feeling quite excited, so thanks. My name is Nicole McKee, and I stand before you as an ACT Party candidate, vying for a spot to represent you all in the next term of Parliament. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me so that you can gain a picture of the person that I am, and a little bit about some of ACT's policies that I get to present to you today. I'm 48 years old. I don't dye my hair. I'm married with 4 children, although they're actually young adults now, and we only have the youngest one still at home. The other 3 are out there studying in tertiary education or partaking in that university of life. I was born in Lower Hutt, and I moved to Rotorua in my early teens. I came back to the hut in my early 20s, and for the last 20 years, I've been making a home with my family in Haitaitai, Wellington. Hence, I'm standing as the Rongotai candidate for the ACT Party. I've worked in a variety of occupations, in law for over a decade, both in Rotorua at East Brewster and in Wellington for Kubra and Matthews. 5 years with Steve's Wholesale, a reputable firearms component importer. I was the Mountain Safety Council National Firearms Program Manager, in charge of the most amazing and giving group of volunteer instructors, and they need an applause if they're here. That was an ad lib, but it was worth it. More recently, as a small business owner, delivering firearms safety education in rural and isolated communities for the New Zealand Police. Volunteering in roles within community and sports is something that I have really cherished, giving back. Giving back to those that have volunteered their time to me and to those that are also coming through, sharing my knowledge and my learnings. I still sit on several boards, forums and committees because this is where I have learned to advance the issues of the people that I represent. I've been fortunate enough to wear the New Zealand black blazer with the silver fern, and I have represented our country on a number of occasions in shooting sports, both full bore and service rifle. Disciplines that require the utmost dedication and commitment to get to national representative level. But I must say that the most rewarding role has been as a stay-at-home mum for 8 years to 4 beautiful, it's great, isn't it? We're lucky when we get to do it. And I have 4 beautiful, humble, talented young Kiwis, Jakana, Kiriahi, Rex and Brereton. While I was being that mum at home, my husband, who is a builder, decided to study at university and get his law degree. He got that degree and he's still a builder. So during that time, the only source of meat that we could afford was actually hunting our own. And I'm so grateful to the many people who made their properties and their time available so I could go hunt with them. And as a result, I became a keen hunter. And to the uninitiated out there, just let me say, don't knock it till you've tried it. There is something truly special about providing for your family from the land, our whenua, to the table. Hunting for so many is actually an essential pastime, and we must never assume that everyone has the equal ability to access affordable food. In this nation's backyard, we harbour a source of wild, edible, lean and unprocessed meat, and there are many who rely on their own ability to hunt and to gather. ACT wants to make sure that they continue to have access to this essential homegrown protein. Politics has its hands in most spheres of life, and hunting and wildlife are not exempt. New Zealand's economy is bolstered by such things as guided hunting that produces as much as $100 million of income into regional businesses. But this industry and income, it's under threat. Underhanded, backdoor attempts by the Greens to eradicate the Himalayan mountain goat, the tahr, is counterproductive and unethical. The Greens approved driving this animal to the brink of extinction, and they wanted it done now, while the snow is so thick in the national parks that the animals can't run away from the helicopters. Who would ever have thought that the Greens would purposely drive any species to extinction? They directed the slaughter of huge numbers of animals classified internationally as being of special interest. And why are they of special interest? Because New Zealand has been recognised as the only country in the world that has a sustainable herd. Stakeholders had to go to the High Court last week to force the government to rethink the radical culling. Sound herd management, not eradication, is the answer. ACT advocates saving the species, sending in the hunters, not the helicopters, and supporting our businesses. Let's move on to 1080. Sodium fluoroacetate, in the form of a poisoned pellet being dropped on our national parks in an effort to kill pests. New Zealand is the only country in the world using the poison this way. After a 1080 drop, the silence in our bush is deafening. 1080 kills much more than pests. I'm not a fan of 1080. I despise it. I do not like what it does to our game animals and to our farm animals when the drop mark has been overreached. I have real concerns about what it may be doing to our fish and the integrity of our lakes and our rivers and our waterways. We need to invest in alternate science and methods that will make us predator-free by 2050, but to be able to do it in a way that lives up to the claim that we make of being the clean, green country. I understand that there is work being done on bettering the deer repellent used in the drops, and we do still need to eradicate the pests. But we need to find solutions fast so we can stop dropping deadly poison all over our pristine rural lands. This is one of my priorities, and that is why ACT is committed to finding and funding alternate solutions to poison drops. Now, let's talk about guns. Last year, the Labour government enacted a radical change to New Zealand firearm laws. And as a result, I was drawn to ACT when our leader, David Seymour, became the sole voice of reason through the first tranche of rushed arms legislation. He was daring to be different, but he didn't have to sell out his values to do so. ACT tried to take the emotiveness out of the decision-making and attempted to encourage solution-focused policies as a real target. Now that took real guts. David Seymour was being shouted down by so many, but he stuck to his principles, to his party's principles, to promote better and efficient public policies. David Seymour alone recognised that the process was being unnecessarily rushed. Guy didn't even know anything about guns. But it's the principles that mattered. So that man, he got my vote right then. And we need more people like him in Parliament. Just last month, the Labor government pushed through a second tranche of firearms legislation. Once again, it was poorly drafted and riddled with mistakes. It does not even attempt to address the real issue: criminals with guns. There are very real concerns around the data security of a gun register. I mean, look what just happened with COVID-19. The draconian regulations that are forced onto clubs and ranges that will see some of them close, that violation of a doctor-patient relationship that's going to stop people from seeking help. The only changes that were made to the bill before its assent were to fix a small number of basic mistakes that were made in the first draft. They will also see delay in parts of the implementation over several dates. This is confusing people as to what they need to comply with and by when. The bottom line, the Arms Legislation Act 2020 will not make New Zealand safer. ACT's got a policy that can fix this. Give us your party vote, and our priority will be to have this year's Arms Legislation Act repealed. We will then set about restoring the best firearms laws in the world by including all stakeholders in the drafting process. We will introduce a new bill that will balance public safety and firearms control, safe use, responsibility, and freedom. Ultimately, we will update and replace the Arms Act 1983 and all of its subsequent amendments. We also support the face-to-face local presence of vetting personnel and arms officers regardless of who is administrating the licensing regime. Now this is going to make all of New Zealand safer. ACT plans to go after the gangs and their guns, hitting them where it hurts, in their pockets. If police find illegal firearms at an unlawful operation, like a meth lab, that's been run by a gang, their assets will be seized. In the current law, the Crown is required to establish a direct connection between the gang's illicit money and their assets. ACT will make the illegal possession of a firearm a new threshold to freeze and seize. What is really important here is that this policy will only be enforceable on gangs and their members, and only where an unlawful gang operation is taking place. So this means that Joe Citizen won't lose their assets if they do something wrong, but they might lose their licence and their guns. There needs to be a clear line between criminal activity and genuine human error. Both will have consequences, but at the moment, all licensed owners are being treated like criminals, and this needs to stop. onto welfare. I spoke earlier of relying on hunting to feed my family, and there were times when I also had to rely on government welfare to see me through some of those harder times in life. I embrace the available welfare system the way that it should be, as an interim measure while you work your way through the stepping stones to employment. It is vital that the government supports Kiwis in genuine hardship, those who cannot otherwise support themselves or their families. Government should play a limited but important role in protecting the vulnerable, and we want to make sure that nobody is left behind. ACT's plan is to introduce an employment insurance fund. Hard-working New Zealand taxpayers won't have to pay more for it. We will redirect 0.55%, that's a little over 0.5% of your taxes that you already pay, to a ring-fenced fund. You can then claim employment insurance for 1 week in every 5 that you have worked. So if you've paid into the scheme for 4 years, 55% of your average weekly earnings will be your benefit for a maximum of 26 weeks or up to $60,000. If you've been employed for a year, then you would be entitled to 10 weeks at 55% of your earnings over the year. So we're making your taxes pay for when you are out of work. So you know, ACT will not be making any changes to the supported living payment, the orphans, unsupported child, young parent or youth payment beneficiary benefits. But we do need to ensure that those on the job seeker and solo parent benefits are using this option as intended, as that stepping stone to employment and assistance in their time of need, rather than a government-funded lifestyle option. $6,000 children a year are born onto a benefit. And the simple truth is that these kids face a bleaker future than children that are born to parents in work. They face worse outcomes on nearly every social indicator, and it is often intergenerational. Short-term requirement is fine, but chronic long-term dependency on welfare is damaging the spirit and the well-being of too many New Zealanders and their children. This needs to change. ACT will introduce electronic income management for beneficiaries on the standard job seeker benefit and those who continue to have children while they're on the solo parent benefit. There will be income management for those convicted of benefit fraud, for people with substance or alcohol abuse problems, and those that are coming out of prison. For people who don't know, the electronic income management is where a beneficiary is issued with an electronic card which tracks their spending. It has restrictions on the purchases of alcohol, tobacco, and gambling, so the money actually gets to where it's needed the most. Nearly all of the benefit is issued on the electronic card, apart from a small amount of discretionary cash which is given to the beneficiary. We are already successfully using electronic income management for the youth and young parent beneficiaries. ACT wants to see the teaching of financial literacy to help all New Zealanders gain employment and move away from state dependency. So finally, back to my reason for being here. I bring to this party real-life experience for all of the policies that I have shared with you today. I dared to be different, and I laid out my personal profile for causes that are shared by others that are here. I want to live in an Aotearoa that values freedom of choice and expression, a country that promotes personal responsibilities, a country where our future generations can actually afford to live and to work, a country that has a government that listens and acts responsibly for all of its citizens, an Aotearoa where we all take responsibility to change our future. Thank you. Kia ora.
Guess who? Ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker for the night, I'm pretty sure you know who it is. Ladies and gentlemen, go wild and crazy and please welcome David Seymour.
See, I told you we had two David Seymours. Thank you very much, everybody. Elections are very special in New Zealand and in all democracies because they're spontaneous. They're driven by you, and they're an opportunity for you to change your future. If you think about it, that spontaneity, the government doesn't actually do very much. They book the polling booths, announce the date, print the ballot papers. The rest of it is done by you. The government might set the stage, but it's you who writes the script and plays the central part. It's a story that is entirely yours. And as Richard Prebble likes to remind us, each person can claim only 1/5,000,000th of the opportunity that this country has to offer, and every person can make a difference in an election. I want to thank each and every one of you for packing out the Waterfront Theatre. I especially want to thank our 52 candidates standing to raise the party vote up and down New Zealand. In your program is a tribute to one candidate who tragically could not be here. Stu Peterson was a cheerful, intelligent man, liked and respected by his political allies and enemies alike. It's tragic that I think he would have very likely been an ACT MP this year, and I acknowledge his sister Margot and his wife Pamela, who are here with us today. Thank you for being with us. This event would not be possible without the tireless work of many volunteers. too many to name, but Guy Quartermain, our videographer, made the incredible videos that have been interspersed amongst the speakers. Incidentally, I'm going door knocking after this, so if you like what you saw, you can come along. But I especially want to thank Regan Pollock, who allowed her husband Malcolm to organise this on her birthday. Thank you, Regan. And I'm sorry to tell you that the preparations of something like this can only last 6 months. So tomorrow we are sending him home to you. The event is possible because people give up so much of their time to invest in democracy. And they don't do it for kickbacks, because we don't have a special trust or foundation like certain parties. They do it for a better New Zealand. And so I want to first of all thank everybody who contributes to making ACT possible and writing the script that becomes the traffic of our electoral stage at this election. Thank you. And it matters because the world has changed. Now, it's quite possible that this time next year, COVID-19 will be a distant memory. Anything's possible. It's just extremely unlikely. Much more likely is that the virus and its mutations will swirl around the globe for years to come. We now live on a pandemic planet, and New Zealand will have to change and adapt to that reality. So far, it has to be said, we have had more good luck than we've had good management. And we're going to have to reverse that before our luck runs out. And I'm not going to dwell on the whole saga, but let me just give you one example of what I mean by good luck over good management. Did anyone notice how New Zealand's strategy changed 3 times without debate while Parliament was shut? First, we were going to flatten the curve. In other words, let COVID-19 spread through the population just slow enough for the healthcare system to keep up. Then the strategy was elimination. We were going to eliminate COVID-19 from our shores. But oh no, it transpired when epidemiologists say elimination, they don't actually mean elimination. They meant keep it at a manageable level. And some of the wonkier among us asked us how that was different from flattening the curve, but no matter, because the next thing that happened is we decided actually we were going for eradication anyway and had an extra week of lockdown. Through all of this, if you were to question, you were set upon as an enemy of the state, liable to be attacked by angry mobs, but thankfully restrained at home in the comfort of their easy chair, tweeting and commenting on Facebook. In spite of that, I'm actually a massive optimist. Well, actually, I'm quite normal-sized, but I'm very optimistic about our geography. You know, we have an enormous opportunity if we make smart choices out of this, and I want to talk a little bit about that towards the second half of this speech. Which hasn't arrived yet, sorry to say. Because at the moment, people are facing great uncertainty. And I hear about it every day as an electorate MP from people uncertain about what the future holds. You know, there's small business owners who know more about the economy than any economist. They have to get up and produce a product or service that consumers want to buy at a price they can afford, or their livelihood evaporates like that. The current situation means they have little ability to plan, especially to the extent that they depend on global travel. The Epsom electorate is New Zealand's education electorate. It is only 20 square kilometres, but it boasts 30 schools. Now there's an electorate that loves education. And almost all of those schools rely to differing extents on revenue from international education. There's no plan to get something as important as international education right now. In fact, the Secretary of Education told principals not to count on it next year, or maybe not in 2022. The universities, for their part, are carefully cost-cutting as they adjust to the new reality. But it's the uncertainty that makes that reality so much more difficult to plan for. Any business that relies on people coming in and out of the country needs certainty and a plan. And you'd be amazed at the variety of businesses affected. Just up the hill from here, Auckland Council and New Zealand Government, for better or worse, are attempting to build a rail tunnel. Now, it just so happens that there are not a lot of rail tunnellers who live in New Zealand waiting for us to build one every 100 years. Most of them tend to be French, as it turns out. They say, you drill your hole as a triangle through the ground, you know? And it's okay, I mean, I practiced that. And they can't get them here. They've got an exemption, but there's no capacity to bring them in. Now, let me ask you, how many people would be comfortable going on a rail tunnel that was built by engineers using Zoom? You can apply that basic story to any high-skilled engineering project in this country for the next 3 years. And then there's the fishing industry. They depend on overseas crews to come in and staff the boats. And if they can't do it, then all the onshore jobs go as well. Now, I've got news for Stuart Nash. I know there's unemployment, but you can't just take someone off the dole this week and send them out to the Southern Ocean for 3 months next week. You know, for a lot of reasons, health and safety, for instance. The horticulture sector and its many jobs and packhouses and administration are wholly dependent on seasonal workers to do the picking. Now, I haven't actually started on tourism or hospitality yet, but the problems for that $40 billion of industry should be obvious enough. And then we come to young people who face the twin uncertainty of public debt and economic upheaval. And they know that they're going to be stuck with the bill for the government's borrowing right now. Now, some of you are probably wondering how we got Sam and how I met him. He was the warm-up guy on Dancing with the Stars. And you may recall that I had a brief, but not as brief as it might have been, stint as a celebrity dancer. And one of the many happy outcomes of this time was that I gained a following of teenagers on Instagram. And if you think they're too young to vote, let me tell you about text voting. And of course, they ignored me for a couple of years because I'm a politician and they're teenagers, and why would they be interested if I wasn't dancing anymore? But the strangest thing happened in the last couple of months. They've started messaging me again. And they say, who is the government borrowing all this money from? And who will pay it back? Now, I would guess that they don't normally follow politics, let alone fiscal policy, but they know something's up, and they're not stupid. They've heard a snippet on the news or a conversation between their parents, and they recognise they're getting stuck with the bill for a very long time. Even before the COVID crisis, we had an anxious generation setting out into a complicated world. What sort of jobs and economy will they face? That uncertainty has just been massively compounded, and I worry that this crisis will have a permanent effect on current teens and 20-somethings. That is, unless we act now to change our future. And let me be clear, the message is not, let's open the border and see what happens. It is, we need to talk about what our national strategy actually is. But it shouldn't be surprising that we've had such poor leadership and so much failure. This government is a world champion in failing at things. Just imagine where they'd be in the polls had COVID not come along. After all, look, it was elected to be open and transparent. I don't know about you, but most of us know more about New Zealand First funding arrangements than we do about what the government's doing half the time. It was elected to give us affordable housing, and instead it gave us the Honourable Phil Twyford. And then it was supposed to be doing light rail to Auckland Airport, and it gave us Phil Twyford again. It was elected to solve child poverty, and material hardship amongst children went up. I mean, there is not an issue or a task this government can set itself and fail to fail at. It also promised to make New Zealand safer after our nation's tragedy in Christchurch. And it managed to alienate the licensed firearm owner community and make 3/4 of the firearms it banned disappear. Most importantly, as we heard from Nicole, it didn't actually make us safer. In fact, the opposite. And let us never forget the fiscal picture, because I see Sir Roger's here, and so is Ruth Richardson, and I want to hear this. Let us never forget, this government was elected with a forecast $6 billion plus surplus for 2020. Even before COVID, and with $3 billion of extra tax, that forecast changed in 2 years to a $1 billion deficit. Forget about fixing the roof while the sun's shining. These guys had a few days of good weather and decided to sell the roof altogether. This government failed at everything it set out to do and went $10 billion a year over budget in the process. When you think about it, it's actually quite a feat. Where this government has succeeded is having the best PR of any government in the history of our country. You know, the spin that they managed to put on failure is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you take that guy, David Clark. Did you notice that even the worst minister in the government still realised it was time to go before the Prime Minister did? I mean, you know, the one thing he got right is he had to sack himself. And I'm not making this up. He's the Minister of Health in the middle of the greatest health crisis in a century. And we now face the same basic problem of spin over substance as we try to navigate that greatest health crisis in living memory. And yet, Labor's election campaign manager is also in charge of managing the border. And the great shame is that policy is being made for a political party's re-election instead of for the future of New Zealand. We plainly deserve better from our government, and we can turn that good luck into good management if we do three things. The first is we've got to lead the world in public health. We've got to be actually doing it, not doing the rhetoric. And after we lead the world in public health, we've got to be honest about the debt. And if we get those things right, the third thing we've got to do is seize the opportunity of being an island nation on a pandemic planet. Because if we get this right, it can actually work out very well indeed. Those are the challenges that any new government will face on September 20. And we'll have to end government by focus group, fear and groupthink. We'll have to look into the future and confront our problems strategically as adults. Starting with the public health challenge. You know, we're given a daily dose of fear with tacit demands for gratitude. And what we're basically told is that our two options are either A, remain in total physical isolation from the world for an undefined future until a vaccine comes about, run up deficits by borrowing money, or open the border too soon, let COVID back in, go back into lockdown and possibly die. So the options you're being given are to be dead or dead broke. That is not the kind of choices. Those are not the kinds of choices that the next generation of New Zealanders deserve. Our government's approach is to lock people down in a small number of hotels. How small? So small that they can process about 240 people a day. I calculated that if the reported 1 million passport holders and residents tried to come home that way, it'll take 12 years. Now, I know this thing's going to go on for a while. I don't think it'll go on that long. That's before we talk about a single skilled worker who is going to bid the time, and let alone a single international student, let alone a single tourist. So the bottom line we're left with is that the government's approach is clearly unsustainable, and as Sir Roger would say, there has to be a better way. And the simple goal should be to have the world's smartest borders, not just as a rhetorical device, as the Prime Minister's been using it for the last 2 months, but actually as a practical reality. And here are 5 principles for achieving that. First of all, we just got to stop preaching the fear. Ask what we can do, not what we can't do. It was Franklin Delano Roosevelt who said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And he could have been talking about New Zealand's election in 2020. The whole tone of COVID policy management must shift from fear to ingenuity. You know, we were told tens of thousands would die. That is now clearly, at the very least, questionable. And yet we're told every day that it's dangerous to even talk about our country's long-term strategy. And the problem with creating a state of fear is that it spirals. Take, for instance, 2 women get out of managed isolation. They drive the wrong way on the motorway. They talk to a man. Quick, how is he? Is he dead? No. Great. But then compassionate leave is taken away from all those people, and I've had constituents in this position, who will miss funerals of their loved ones because we can't have compassionate leave for anyone as a result. Some idiot escapes and goes to a supermarket. Now, I wrote this speech a few days ago. I haven't caught up with the other idiots, but now 200 police officers have to man the entrances of all these hotels instead of being on the beat fighting actual crime. And who knows what will happen next? The state of fear has to keep being fed. I suspect next week, everyone at the airport will be taken to Paramaribo, where they live until the end of their natural life just to be sure they didn't have COVID-19. I mean, that's actually where we're going. Now, of course, we need to be safe. But my point is the government has put itself in an impossible position. It fed the fear, and now it must keep feeding it or be swallowed itself. And the real losers are all of those who need openness, but are gripped by the state of fear that the government created as a crowd management tool. Every time there's a mistake, the ratchet tightens and opportunity becomes more distant. A party vote for ACT is a party vote to change not just the script, but the tone of the script. Yes, COVID-19 is a danger, but the reality is it will still be with us for a while at least. We're going to have to get smart about how we manage it. We need to end the state of fear and have a state of open debate about how we manage our country's challenges. And the second principle is this: we need to have that open debate. I think the biggest problem we face as a country is not ultimately health or education or welfare or productivity or COVID-19. It's an underlying problem that links all of our challenges. It is the flagging ability for us to be able to have debates and disagree civilly. And didn't Chris Bailey put that case so eloquently earlier on? Throughout the COVID crisis, groupthink went on steroids. The government relied on a small coterie of advisors who, and it's fair enough, have turned out to be wrong in hindsight on some issues. Worse, rather than informing the debate, they were often there to be enforcers of the party line. We need an open debate about our options as a country. And let's start with an adult and open discussion about what our strategy is. Here are just some questions. Is it our strategy to maintain total eradication at all costs? And if so, what costs is who prepared to bear? And just how many people can come in and out of the country under that scenario? And how long are we prepared to wait for a vaccine? And when will we change tack if it becomes clear that one is not coming? If, on the other hand, staying isolated from the world is not an acceptable option, what risks are we prepared to take? The Prime Minister has said that contact tracing can be as good as a vaccine. Well, how good is ours? We haven't talked about it for literally months. Perhaps, quite reasonably, it might be said that we are waiting for crucial information about how this pandemic is evolving. That would be reasonable. But what information are we looking for, and when do we plan to make the decision? These are the kinds of questions that need to be answered, but are not. How would we do it differently? Well, let me give you this thought. If there are crucial decisions to be made, the government could call for submissions. It could call for experts in open debate. It could actually allow, instead of just 2 people on a podium making the calls, to have a range of voices. That doesn't mean we aren't talking about strong leadership. That doesn't mean the government doesn't make the call in the end. But it would be very helpful for so many people out there to understand what the plan is and what the trade-offs are, because right now they simply don't. A party vote for ACT is a vote to tackle this once-in-a-century crisis as an open society, with a government that welcomes and facilitates debate about our future. Number 3, there we go, start working on a country-by-country basis. We should be immediately opening green lanes for our COVID-free Pacific friends. What's wrong? Thank you. What's wrong with Samoan RSE workers coming to pick strawberries, for example? What's wrong with New Zealanders who like pina colada going to Raro? And actually, this is a geopolitical imperative, because if we don't wrap our arms around our Pacific friends, somebody else will. And we... That's a different issue, but the point is this: if we can't open up to COVID-free countries that are semi-legally part of New Zealand anyway, what can we do? You know, the Prime Minister was asked about the Cook Islands, and she said we couldn't have people coming and going there because if 2 aeroplanes landed at once, they couldn't separate out the passengers. I'm not making this up. This is a country where we launch satellites into orbit around the Earth, and yet I can kind of understand it. If my government had been responsible for Kiwi Build Light Rail, child poverty going up, PPE and contact tracing, I'd be a little bit worried about my government doing anything else too. But there are other people that do get it right, and Taiwan is the expert in this issue. They actually went smart and went early. Why is the government not announcing an intention to reopen a connection with Taipei? Two reasons we should do it. Number one, there's about as many potential Taiwanese tourists as Australians, except they're richer, more polite, and speak better English. So, you know. But the second reason is that they are the world leaders in fighting this virus, and I think we could learn something from them. More importantly, if we have a can-do attitude, it could be the start of something big. You know, if a few plane loads of people manage to relax in Raro without incident, who knows what we could do next? A party vote for ACT is a vote to stop saying everywhere is dangerous and start asking which countries can we open up to on what terms. Number 4 is that we need to augment our public health response with better technology. And this is in ACT's 5-point plan, the original 5-point plan, by the way. Ours was released in May. You notice Labor and National, I think, released the same document as each other 2 months later. But it simply said we should get rid of the absurdity of 12 PHUs using spreadsheets, merge them into one, and get them equipped with the best technology. We should ask questions like, can, with better testing and testing before people board a plane, people be released earlier? Lufthansa are already offering this out of Frankfurt. But just imagine the change in tone and attitude if the government of New Zealand encouraged Air New Zealand to become the world leader in COVID testing and tracing, instead of telling them not to fly to New Zealand. I mean, that's the difference. That's what we need. Could we, for instance, reduce isolation times if people are prepared to use GPS traceable, wearable technology and avoid certain areas? What would be the penalties for violation to make sure nobody does? Well, during the lockup, local members of parliament like me were bombarded with well-meaning people offering innovative solutions to fight the virus. It's not for me to champion any particular technology, but just the idea that we need to start being open to a tech-savvy public health solution. ACT's alternative budget said we should also significantly increase funding at the border and for public health in general. A party vote for ACT is a vote to modernise public health from a paradigm of spreadsheets and screw-ups to actually lead the world in epidemic response technology. And finally, number 5, is that we need to start working and engaging with the public sector. You know, Rob Fife is probably our best business leader. He created the modern New Zealand that we all know and love, or knew and loved until about 10 weeks ago. He gave 2 months of his time for free to help this government bridge the gap with the private sector. And he got nowhere, left frustrated, and they didn't even thank him. An utter disgrace. We need to start asking the question, how can we possibly reintegrate trust between the public and private sectors to fight this virus? Can schools and universities that run hostels already be trusted to run their own isolation programs? What about RSE, Recognised Seasonal Employment Scheme employers, who already have to provide government-inspected accommodation for all of their workers? Should hotels be able to offer managed isolation on a user-pays basis? It would be much better than the government strong-arming airlines not to get here. You know, this government has to improve in the way that we work between the public and private sector. And a party vote for ACT is a vote to bridge that chasm between the sectors that has grown up under this government and become a yawning gap under this crisis. And if we can follow those 5 principles and lead the world in public health, the next thing we need to do is actually be honest about deficits and debt. Now, I mentioned those kids who have been writing to me, and they're not stupid, they're intuitive, and they're right. Let me put it in some perspective and put some numbers around it. GDP is, or until recently was, $300 billion. Public debt, 20% of that, $60 billion. Break it down to something relatable. As we often hear, we're a team of 5 million. And so that's $60,000 each, it's GDP. Debt at 20%, $12,000 each. The government just undertook to borrow $140 billion, or $28,000 for every individual in this country. A family of 5 will have $200,000 of public debt on their account. Treasury predicts that as interest rates return to normal, the interest on that debt will be $1,500 per person, or $7,500 for that family of 5. Treasury's fiscal strategy report says that we're going to spend more on interest than on education. Are you starting to see why it is that young people are worried about this? Some people will say, but other countries have it worse. The great retreat of bold and courageous reformers. But we have a couple of other factors to consider. One of them is our private debt. If you combine public and private debt together, New Zealand has one of the worst net external positions in the world. In fact, in the West, only the pigs, Portugal, Italy, Greece and Spain, great places to visit, not to be in fiscal policy. That's not the kind of company we want to be in, but those are the ones that we're with. Second is that we are a frontier society. And that's a wonderful thing. We're children of pioneers. You know, you or your ancestors came here to give your kids a better life, and it's one of the great things that binds us together as Kiwis. But it also means that we are susceptible to shocks. Earthquakes, agricultural diseases, other things that sometimes happen when you live on the world's frontier. Those are two reasons we cannot afford wasteful spending, but here is some more. No matter what we do, economic activity and the government's tax revenue are going to decline for the foreseeable future. At the same time, the demands for government expenditure, people on welfare and so on, is going to increase. We have to stop the waste. And there's so much of it. My favourite is the Barry Crump Fund. Can you believe the government is spending $1 billion for 11,000 Kiwis to go bush? Some of them are going to be planting pine trees, some of them removing wilding pines, some of them shooting wallabies. And the only question is whether we're going to have more or fewer pine trees $1 billion later. Actually, since they banned centerfire semi-automatic rifles, my bet is that the wallabies have the best chance. People in Queenstown are aghast that the Prime Minister showed up for a photo op and gave $10 million to a millionaire in AJ Hackett. You know, I wish we could get Stephen Joyce back. At least he knew how to get value for a corporate welfare photo op. And the fundamental problem that's missed is that the tourist industry is not short of tourist attractions, it needs tourists. They're not even solving the right problem. Then there's a lot of this crazy COVID spending that just has to stop. But then there's the business as usual spending that never added up. Take Shane Jones' Provincial Growth Fund that Brooke so ably skewered. I used to call it pork barrel politics, but I got a complaint from a pig farmer. He said his animals were embarrassed. I had to stop. Remember, when you've got a $1 billion deficit in good times, you can either do one of three things: tax more, spend less, or grow the economy faster. We simply cannot tax more. We are already the highest tax country on the Pacific Rim. People wonder why investment and innovation happens in Singapore more than here. Well, it's very simple. Singaporean governments spend 17% of GDP. New Zealand governments, central and local, 37% of GDP. What that means is if you invest and succeed in Singapore, you keep 83%. Here, you keep 63%. Simple. And it's not just Hong Kong and Singapore where taxes are lower than New Zealand. Actually, it's the whole lot. Singapore, Hong Kong, Canada, the US, Japan, Vietnam, Korea, Australia. All of them have governments that tax less than New Zealand. If we raise taxes, then we take out our third option of the economy growing slower, because investment and innovation will detour past New Zealand. And that's why the Greens plan, apart from being totally immoral, is so economically stupid. What's left is spending less. Once we've dealt with the Shane Jones, sorry pigs, can we afford a government, we must ask, that spends $1 billion a year on KiwiSaver subsidies? You know, the debt management office at Treasury goes out to the world market and says, can we borrow $1 billion this year? People say, why? Well, we're going to give it to our citizens, have them invested in the share market. And of course, the money markets say, well, that sounds like the stupidest idea we've ever heard, but the New Zealand taxpayer's overriding it, so here's $1 billion. It's completely insane. Any financial advisor will tell you to deal with your debt before you try to become an investor. Can we afford fees-free tertiary education? Here we go. This won't make me popular with certain people, but it has to be said. The policy has not increased tertiary participation. Most of the benefit has gone to kids from high decile schools. And poor brown kids who never get a chance in low decile schools, they don't go to tertiary education anymore. They're just left further behind by middle-class welfare this country can ill afford. These are the honest questions we need to have. Sorry, I'm still very angry about charter schools. ACT's alternative budget shows how we can return to surplus by 2023, but it involves honesty, confronting our new reality and reducing low-quality spending. And I know it won't be popular to say it, but it is the issue we have to face, and a party vote for ACT is a vote to be honest about our fiscal track where no other party will. So being honest about the debt's the second thing any new government will have to do on the morning of 20 September. But actually, I think this could work out quite well for us. You know, being an island nation on a pandemic planet gives us choices that continental countries do not have. We can change our future by choosing how we engage with the world, but only if we're prepared to be resourceful, creative, and open in our approach. This could well be the reset that New Zealand has long needed. But we need to be honest about why our productivity hasn't grown, and without population growth, our economy overall wouldn't have been up to much either. Can you believe it took Watercare 8 years not to get consent to bring the most vital liquid into a city of 1.5 million people? Oh, no. It took them 8 years to get halfway up the list to do that. Now, if the Auckland Council, with all its resources and highly paid employees, can't get a resource consent under the RMA, imagine someone who just wants to extend their deck on the weekend. Resource management reform will be a priority of the next government. Not a working group, not a vague plan, but a clear commitment to replacing a law that's out of date with workable resource management law based on property rights. And then, then there's the question, what about foreign investment? We are regularly ranked as one of the hardest countries in the world to send capital to. You know, we're down there with Indonesia and Saudi Arabia. If we're going to have an economic renaissance, it will take foreign capital. ACT's 5-point plan says we should fast-track foreign direct investment from friendly OECD countries. And for some people, that's controversial. They say Canadian pensioners investing in light rail would have been the end of our sovereignty. I lived in Canada for 5 years. I can assure you, we have nothing to fear from Canadian pensioners. Apart from anything else, you'll notice in the statistics, when Canada legalised cannabis, the only group that started smoking more was over 65. So we're going to be just fine if we let them send us their money. And the same with those from every other democratic OECD country. If we can't build stuff and we can't get investment, what about new technology? I have students come and see me from the University of Auckland who work on genetics and some of the most exciting stuff you hear about. They even have the ability to innovate and make climate-friendly cows for Mark. But the problem is, under our medieval superstitious laws around science of genetic modification, they have to decamp to California as soon as they want to test anything outside the lab. What about financial technology? That sounds like an opportunity for an educated remote country like New Zealand. Harmoney, an innovative business in the Epsom electorate, had to cancel their entire original business plan when they ran into regulatory burden. But they can do it overseas. I suspect that over time they'll focus more and more on offshore markets. And what we will see is that they will become an overseas company. What a shame. We heard Simon speak about the waste management problem. You know, people complain about landfills. Well, the Resource Management Act says that now that China's given up on recycling for us, we are compelled to bury waste in the ground as our only option for much of our waste. That is absurd. But the government actually knows itself that its regulations are stopping people doing things because its own favoured activities keep running into its own regulations. Avatar needed to get in. No problem, special exemption. The government's special infrastructure projects have had special legislation passed to absolve them from going through the Resource Management Act. When the government has trouble with regulation, it changes the rules. When the private sector has problems with regulation, they have to either suck it up, worse still, give it up. ACT's 5-point plan for the economy includes regulatory reform that makes ministers ask really basic questions. What is this law for? What problem does it solve? Do its benefits exceed its costs? If we did that with the current lot, they wouldn't have made any laws yet. The ACT Party is a party vote for ACT is a vote to start supporting, not stopping people from doing innovative things for our economy and our country. And the reason for that is that this crisis is an opportunity. It's the opportunity for self-starters and independent thinkers, those people who know it doesn't matter about the colour of your skin or where you're from, but the quality of your ideas and the content of your character. The opportunity is for those like Mark who farm and keep rural New Zealand special, who've been taken for granted for far too long. Those who have people who embody the very best of our country's values. I say to you in the rural sector, ACT is your voice. A vote for ACT. Farmers are everywhere. A vote for ACT is a vote for less debt and lower taxes, for more freedom and greater personal responsibility. For those who get up, work hard, save and invest, I say to you, ACT has your values. A vote for ACT is a vote for safer, smarter borders that accepts the new reality we are confronted with, but faces it with courage and conviction, not unimaginative fear-mongering. A vote for ACT is a vote for those who want to engage in an honest conversation about the way this country is headed and are prepared to be standing up and counted for doing the right thing. A vote for ACT, as we heard from Brooke, is a vote for a New Zealand where the next generation of eager, resourceful, ambitious millennials can make a difference in their own lives and the lives that they care about. Not be fodder for politicians and their next grand government scheme. I say to my generation, ACT is our voice of a generation. A vote for ACT is a vote for those small business owners who know more about the economy than any Wellington economist. Those people who make those products that people want at a price they can afford. I say to small and medium enterprises in New Zealand, ACT is your voice, and didn't we hear that from Chris today? And yes, a vote for ACT is a vote for a genuine chance to jumpstart the economy. We can balance the books and create a government that's efficient and effective, as well as delivering the essential services that people depend upon. But it all starts with treating each other as adults. You know, Labor and National have both released 5-point plans. The only problem is no one could tell the difference. The original plan was from ACT. The media is still stuck in first past the post thinking. They want a rendition of the same old red versus blue show. But if the red and blue policies are the same, then that strategy by the media denies our country a policy debate. Don't let them get away with it. I say to you, it can be different, but it can only change if you show the courage of our convictions and choose to change. So the opportunity is for ACT this election. And I just want to show you a picture of where we're going. The last Colmar-Brunton poll, well, actually the last 4, had 1 ACT MP, then 2 ACT MPs, then 3 ACT MPs, then 4. Could anyone see a pattern? Let me show you what it looks like if we let that continue. We're going to bring up right now the new ACT caucus speaking for you in Parliament if we get that right. Every person you talk to, every dollar you raise, every bit of advocacy you do. Thank you. You can, you know, You know, I know every single parliamentarian for the last 6 years. These folks would be better than 90% of them on day one. But I'll finish as I started. This election belongs to you. So please, join up, donate to the party, tell your friends, deliver the pamphlets, host a meeting, follow our bus tour, and make sure that these guys are your voice in Parliament on September 19. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. All right, come on, team.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is it. You have done very well. Thank you very much, everyone, for your great enthusiasm. Downstairs, we're going to have lunch together. You can have a high five. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.